Hey everyone, my name is Trevor McKenzie, and in this presentation, I'll be giving you my interpretation of Aristotle's categories, physics, and posterior analytics for Professor Robeson's Modern Philosophy 333. This video will address ideas in the order they're presented in our readings, explaining the key concepts to the best of my ability, hopefully without butchering anything too bad or putting you guys to sleep in the process. With the intro out of the way, let's begin. We'll be starting off with categories in which Aristotle breaks down existence as he sees it, so it's as ontological as it is confusing. The goal is to help us organize how we think about the reality we experience, as well as how we express these experiences. Aristotle begins by stating that when we present ideas verbally, they're presented as either simple singular terms or composite combinations of terms, which matters because we tend to like making claims about things. Puppy is a simple expression with no true or false value, while adorable puppy is composite and always true. Whether simple or composite, puppy was the subject in that expression, which warrants examination into the concept. Aristotle believed that when these terms refer to something material that's capable of change, that thing is a subject, which can be of or in other subjects. This idea aids in systemizing what's going on when we quantify, qualify, or relate one thing to another, and leads to the concept of substance. Substance is neither of or in a subject, which may sound straightforward until you read that there are primary and secondary substances. To illustrate, we're given the idea of an individual man falling under the category of man, which falls under the category of animal. This hierarchical substance chain, in my interpretation, places animal as the primary and man as the secondary substances, leaving individual man as the subject that's of or in the prior to. And if you're confused, no worries, everything gets better when the concept of contrariety is introduced. When Aristotle says there's nothing contrary to a substance, I take it to mean there's nothing false or untrue about it, because he's using the word in a logical context. Simple terms, as expressions without value, can't be untrue, and since substance is exactly that, it makes sense. They can, however, through composite expression, have contrary or untrue qualities. So, for example, while the term man can be false, knowledgeable man obviously can be. And with that out of the way, we can move on to something a bit more accessible: physics. In physics, Aristotle addresses change in subjects and substances as well as how and why it happens, starting with its apparent order. He believed that no change was random and that there is a set way that change occurs in substances, with properties only transitioning to like properties. In this way, music can become non-music or silence, but it can't become a color like red. In the last example, I used the simple term music and the composite term non-music to express its absence, but music itself was a constant throughout, which illustrates that change requires a subject to be acted on. With how we think about subjects and substances less than tightly wrapped up, let's talk about what they actually are in a physical sense. Aristotle claims that all things are either natural or, well, not, with the difference being that not natural things come into being via artificial means like craftsmanship. That sounds goofy, so for example, imagine planting an oak tree seed and growing a bed. That sounds even goofier, but explains what Aristotle was getting at. An oak tree self-replicates, grows into a tree, etc., into infinity or global warming-induced collapse, but a bed doesn't exactly follow that trend. The tree cycle is self-evident in that it comes into being by nature of being, which is characteristic of natural material, while the bed comes into being because sleeping on the ground is pretty uncomfortable, so we physically intervene. However, both have a form. A form is the ideal representation of a thing. A tree grows to become the form of a tree, while a bed is crafted to become the form of a bed. There's infinitely more depth to the concept, but explaining that is way above my pay grade and ability, so let's move on to causes or explanations for change. These causes or explanations are broken down into material, which is what things are constituted of and come from. Much like the subject, without material, change can't occur. Formal, which refers to the form or essence of a thing that change reflects when it occurs. Efficient, which is the primary source or how of change, while final is the end goal or the why. Since we totally understand what it is to be, what it is to change, and how we can categorize all of the above, we should tackle what it is to know. Posterior analytics is an epistemological exploration into deductive and inductive reasoning. And if those words don't ring a bell, no worries, they'll be explained as we go. Aristotle claims that knowledge comes from demonstration. In this context, demonstration comes in the form of logical syllogism, which is a claim containing two premises and a conclusion. The concept can be illustrated as B is A, C is B, thus C is A. This syllogism's conclusion, that A is C, must be true if the first two premises are true. And it's within this system that Aristotle claims knowledge is reasoned or deduced, hence deductive thinking. But he distinguishes knowledge from scientific knowledge. Scientific knowledge must be knowledge of the cause, and its object must be necessary, which is Greek to me. So, I'm taking it to mean scientific syllogisms must be valid and sound. For a syllogism to be valid, it has to be impossible for the conclusions to be false if the premises are true. But for something to be sound, the premises and conclusion must all be true, which meshes well with the scientific processes of observation and testing. Scientific demonstration then can be said to be true in every instance, which is great for understanding how knowledge is set in our minds, but what does that say about how we know things without deduction? Demonstration requires prior knowledge. So given that Aristotle doesn't believe knowledge is innate or simply in us by default, how exactly do we come to know anything? The answer is experience, and we gain it through our senses, or as Aristotle calls it, sense perception. Through sense impressions, we gain experience and learn to intuitively understand our surroundings through recognition of universals. Universals are essentially properties that can be applied to particulars, which are individual material things. Boring could be a universal to the particular that is this video, and you intuitively or inductively know that without scientific examination or syllogism. You've seen enough YouTube to recognize what is and isn't entertaining, and thus are able to make intuitive judgments without much research. Now, since you have a grip on the only other way Aristotle believes we gain knowledge, we can wrap this up in good conscience. So, to end this, I'd like to ask anyone who made it this far if you think that there's true utility to having a proper system for understanding how we come to understand the world, and what, if any, benefits you think there are to having that system. Hopefully that makes for a decent discussion. Take it easy, everybody.